Everybody. This is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today is entitled How to Provide Students with IEPs Access to Their Grade Level Curriculum Through Text-to-Speech. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Nissan Barlev. Nissan is the Director of Special Education for the Cooperative Education Service Agency 7, a consortium of 38 school districts in Northeast Wisconsin. Nissan is one of 3 partners who administer the Wisconsin Special Education Mediation System and represents the school perspective on the system. Nissan serves on the Governor's Council on Autism, on the Wisconsin Department of Health Services Children's Long-Term Support Council, and the RTI Center State Leadership Team, and on the State Superintendent's Blind and Visually Impaired Educational Council. Nissan is the former president of the Autism Society of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Council of Special Services, which is WCASS. It is my great pleasure today to introduce to you Nissan Barlev. Nissan?
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the presentation, as Bonnie mentioned, on the CAS guide on how to provide students with IEP access to the grade level curriculum through text-to-speech. So, as Bonnie mentioned, I am Nissan Barlev, Director of Special Education for CISA 7. I'm also the co-chair of the 61-member stakeholder task force that developed this publication. The issue addressed in this publication is pretty straightforward. On one hand, Federal IDA 2004 requires IEP teams to provide students with disability access to their grade level curriculum. This is also reflected in the DPI message to IEP teams that we will see in a later slide, as well as in the messages of attorneys for schools and attorneys for parents. Also, we'll see that at a later slide. So, why are there so many students with disabilities who do not have access to the grade level curriculum? Students with disability in most, if not all, middle schools in Wisconsin show a significant gap between their academic achievement scores and grade level expectation. And this gap only widens in high school. How can a 5th grade student who reads at the 1st or 2nd grade level have access to the 5th grade level curriculum? Of course, the student doesn't have access. So how are these students to gain access to the regular ed curriculum? The 61-member task force is offering an answer to this question in this publication. This publication will be disseminated in April next month to all Wisconsin school districts, to all parent organizations, and to all school and parent attorneys. So during the first half of this presentation, I will be discussing the why is it important to provide access to the grade level curriculum. And in the second half, I will share resources from the CAS guide on how to provide the access to grade level curriculum through text-to-speech. So we mentioned the 61-member task force. Who comprises them? So you can see from the slide that includes a number of assistive technology specialists throughout from Wisconsin. We had a large number of teachers, I believe around 9. We involve national CAS staff. That's the group that gave us UDL. We involve also higher education staff. These are researchers that university researcher who specializes in research on special ed, technology, and reading. We included also representation from our Wisconsin Parent Advocacy representation that included Wisconsin Facets, Family Ties, Disability Rights Wisconsin, as well as WISPE, as well as a number of parents on that particular group. We have literacy specialists. We involve administrators, both building principal as well as superintendents on our team. Group also included attorneys for parents and attorneys for school. We also invited, and we had some excellent participation from the leadership of Bookshare and Learning Ally. These are the two major accessible media producers that provide this technology to schools. We also had a presentation from the text-to-speech software industry, school psychologists, the Wisconsin State Reading Association, Speech and Hearing Association, so and more. And you'll be able to see all of these names once you have access to the publication. As I mentioned, will be available next month. I just want to share with you some of the endorsement. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. So why am I not able to do that? Okay, looks like I'm not able to do that. So I'm going to move forward. So why develop this publication? A few more details as to why develop this publication. The motivation of the 61-member CAS stakeholder task force to put together over 200 pages of information was also driven by students with disability failing academic scores and obligation that schools have under federal law to provide access to grade level curriculum. User statistic from the National Access Media Producer. We simply asked the big guns, Bookshare and Learning Ally, how many Wisconsin students with disability use accessible education material? And their answer will surprise you. The team was also impressed by experiences of a 13-year-old boy who is able to articulate the experiences of a 13-year-old boy as many other students who had reading difficulties, as well as the experiences of a parent who was able to articulate the experiences that many other parents feel. We'll have more information as we move along. So where were we able to obtain this information? So Wisconsin Students with Disability Performance, we found on the Wisconsin WISE Dash, on the DPI WISE Dash portal. We were also able to obtain the national performance of students with disability in math and reading from OSTEP reports to Congress on the implementation of IDA. These are annual reports that they provide. So these are the Wisconsin statewide assessment scores in the various subjects. Since the 2015 introduction of the current forward exam, ACT Aspire, ACT statewide, over 80 to 90% of students with IEPs have scored at the non-proficient level in reading, English language art, math, and science. Scores have continued to decline on these areas over time, and you can see from the graphs. It is of no surprise that students with IEP who are not able to access grade level curriculum due to the reading barriers will have significant difficulties in performing on statewide assessment, as we can see from these graphs. We know that traditional reading instruction programs are designed to address the important areas of reading development. That includes phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. While systemic instruction benefits many students, there is a group of students who may never achieve the level of speed, fluency, and accuracy that is required for the grade level. The problem is one of information processing. By the time they have successfully decoded a word, they have little to no energy or cognitive capacity left to solve the word, let alone make sense of it and then do something with it. Congress and the writers of IDA 2004 realized that point and incorporated in IDA 2004 the concept of accessible education material. That includes text-to-speech, Braille, audio files, and large fonts. Congress understood that students with disability that do not use accessible education material, and for simplicity, will simply use from now on AEM, refers to those collection of accessible tools. Congress realized that without using them, students with disability will not be able to access the grade level curriculum, which is the goal of IDA 2004. Unfortunately, IDA 2004 AEM are not widely known or used by educators around the country. And if you had a chance to review our publication, you'll see Dr. Tom Hare, the former OSEP director, that wrote the introductory chapter to our publication, says exactly that he's very disappointed that not enough teachers are using AEM around the country. In summary, students with disability poor academic scores suggest that they do not access their regular ed curriculum. The publication suggests that by using AEM, such as text-to-speech, many students with disability will have access to the regular ed curriculum. The advantage of using text-to-speech, the reader doesn't have to struggle with decoding words, and their brain can concentrate on comprehension. So when we look at the national picture, we see the same thing. So this is based on the OSEP annual report to Congress on the implementation of IDA. Again, about 80% of students with disability are not proficient in either math or reading, and you can see that over time. Reading and math are the only subject area that OSEP is obligated to report to Congress on. So our CAS guide includes a section written by two well-known Wisconsin attorneys, one representing schools, Mary Gerbic, and one representing parents of students with disability, Jeff Spitzer-Resnick. What is so crystal clear about their joint message, about the message of the two attorneys, is that, number one, school districts have a legal obligation under IDA 2004 to provide students with disability access to their grade level curriculum. And if students with disability do not have this access, the school district must use IDA 2004 on remedy for that, that is AEM, which include text-to-speech. So here are a few additional excerpts from this section. And what they write is the current proficiency score of students with disability, what we have seen in the previous slide, should trouble all of us and are a call for action. There may be a number of factors at play, but certainly print disability should be considered by all IEP in all IEP meetings. This is from both attorney of school and parents. In cases where students struggle, and again, another quote from their article, in cases where students struggle but are not otherwise identified with a print disability issue, IEP teams, educators, and parents should consider whether disability-related needs could be addressed through the many print accommodations such as text-to-speech. Both attorneys agree that students with print disability are often not provided accommodation modification within the student IEP to a level that meets the legal standard set forth by the U.S. Supreme Court in its 2017 Andrew F. decision. This is due in part to a lack of understanding of all IDA disability area that may include print disability. This guide, noted to attorneys, this guide seeks to assist providing further education. And I have to say, I could not agree more with these two attorneys' statement, because there certainly was the stakeholder goal and mission in writing this guide to provide more information and education. So based on information from the Wisconsin WISE-Dash portal, Wisconsin has about 120,000 students with disability. So we wanted to know how many of these 120,000 are currently using AEM. As I mentioned before, we contacted Bookshare and Learning Ally, and this is the information we got from them. Learning Ally says only 5%, an N of 6,500 student disability, were registered with Learning Ally. And what's more disturbing, of only that small number of these 6,500, only 2.7%, 181 students use audiobooks frequently. And if you want to know what frequently means, according to Learning Ally scientists, it's 33 days of reading for 20 minutes per day. This, according to them, is a reliable indicator that students are developing the habit of reading. It is also a sign that educators, teachers are implementing the Learning Ally audiobook solution with fidelity. What about Bookshare? Now, Bookshare reports only about 13%, an N of 15,600. Only 13% of these 120,000 students with disability were registered with Bookshare as of February 4, 2021, this last month. While Bookshare doesn't report how frequently text-to-speech material used by these students, it does report that only about 18% of these 15,600, about 2,808 of these students received Bookshare material during the 2019-20 school year. Based on this information for Bookshare and Learning Ally, the majority of Wisconsin students with disability are not afforded IDA 2004 own remedy, namely AEM, in order to access the general ed curriculum. Furthermore, those few who are afforded AEM do not use it often or choose not to use it at all. Okay, so we are at the screen where I wanted to share with you a number of attorney. Oh, there we go. I think maybe I'll be able to do it now. So I want to share with you a video that I've interviewed a school attorney, because I imagine you would assume what a parent attorney will say, but I wanted to share with you a school attorney that would talk about the school district obligation to provide accessible education material, and I will play Christine Hamill. Thank you so much, Christy, for participating in this short interview on the CAS guide that just pictured behind me. The CAS guide on how to provide students with IEPs access to the grade level curriculum. So, Christy, please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background.
Sure, and Nissan, well, first and foremost, thanks for having me here to talk about the CAS guide today. I am the chair of the school law section at Von Briesen and Roper. I come from a family of educators. Both my parents were public school teachers in Iowa, and for my undergrad, I actually attended the University of Northern Iowa, which is formerly known as the Iowa State Teachers College. So I have been around education my entire life, and practicing law in the area of education and school law allows me to still have that connection. I practiced in Atlanta for about 4 years prior to coming to Wisconsin. And in Atlanta, I did governmental liability defense for local governments, so focused my practice on litigation. Once I moved to Wisconsin, I have counseled clients for nearly 10 years here in the state on front-end legal issues, so trying to avoid being in that litigation situation that I was in when I started my practice. I focus my practice on providing legal counsel and innovative inspiration and solutions for school districts. I partner with my clients to develop creative approaches and solutions to really complex challenges facing school districts. And my practice encompasses pupil issues, which relevant for purposes of this discussion includes special education law. My goal is really to work with my clients as school districts to provide that partnership to achieve really optimal outcomes and ultimately really try to focus on the long-term success of the education that is being provided by any given school district.
Thank you, Chrissy. That's terrific. So, Chrissy, based on your experiences as a school attorney, how important is it for students with disabilities to have access to their own grade level curriculum?
Sure. Well, you know, it's absolutely critical for students with disabilities to have that access to regular education curriculum in most situations. And in fact, educating students in the least restrictive environment, as you know, Nissan, the regular education classroom is one of the 6 pillars of the IDEA. And so it's really important for school districts to ensure that the continuum of educational placements includes educating a student with disabilities in the general education classroom. And that really for most students, that is the goal, is that placement in the general education classroom and access to that general education curriculum. I think it's critically important for students with disabilities to access the general education classroom, because it really does help them to develop skills that are going to be needed beyond just those educational skills that they learn in the classroom. They learn the social skills, kind of life skills, to help them be successful human beings.
Sure. So, Chrissy, if students with disabilities in a district that you represent do not have access to the grade level curriculum, for example, a 6th or 7th grade student reading at a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade level, how important is for the local school district to use IDA 2004 on remedy for that, namely the accessible educational material that include text-to-speech, to provide that access to the curriculum?
Sure. Well, Nissan, we know that the hallmark of the IDEA is the requirement that school districts provide students with disabilities with a free and appropriate public education, a FAPE. And generally speaking, whether a school district has provided FAPE is the #1 issue that school districts come to me about. And it's where districts are subject to legal challenges by families. And so that provision of FAPE is really where we see districts and parents seeking legal counsel or seeking advocacy services. Because of that, IEP teams really do need to keep that FAPE obligation and responsibility at the forefront of their mind, which includes ensuring that students with disabilities have access to curriculum at their grade level and materials that allow them to access that curriculum at their grade level. Again, going back to the IDEA, the aim is grade level advancement for children in the general education curriculum. So with that example that you provided, Nissan, where you have a student, 4th, 5th grade student with a specific learning disability who may be reading at either the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade level, it really highlights why accessibility is important. That 5th grade student will likely make minimal, if any, educational progress in a scenario where the student only has access to materials that the student's not able to comprehend, not able to work through, or not able to learn from. And so having those tools and materials that are going to allow the student to access curriculum is important. It's meeting the learner where the learner is at. You can't have a student who's expected to make that grade level advancement and grade level progress in the general education curriculum if they don't have appropriate access.
Thank you, Chrissy. So are there any other thoughts that you would like to share with teachers, parents, or others who will be viewing this interview?
Sure. I think this guide that this interview is going to appear in is really a very well done, comprehensive resource. I was not involved in the development or creation of the guide, but I did have the opportunity to review it. I was really impressed with the number of individuals who collaborated across the spectrum. You've got educational specialists, you have administrators in school districts, you have members of various educational organizations, you have teachers, attorneys for both school districts and parents, you have advocates. So there's a whole multitude of stakeholders who took the time and effort to create this really invaluable resource that's going to ensure that students with disabilities are able to access curriculum and have the tools that they need to be successful. It's also going to allow school districts to ensure that the IDEA is implemented to fidelity. Nissan, one of the things that I'm often asked, whether it's by my friends or family members who are educators or clients that I am working with, is what are some resources that I can utilize to answer some of these questions that I have? Or what are the best resources that are out there to help me as I'm serving students with disabilities? And this guide is going to be an invaluable resource that I can offer as a place for those individuals to go to look, to gain some additional education, gain some additional understanding. So I really commend the task force, the stakeholders who took that time and effort to create this. And I really do look forward to additional resources that I'm sure will follow.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. It was a labor of love in doing that. And thank you for your very informative, thoughtful, valuable feedback. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me, Nissan.
Okay, so we'll go back to our presentation. So there are the same questions I asked Chrissy, I've asked the other attorneys, and you'll be able to see that in the guide. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the experiences of a 13-year-old boy. What happens when schools do not meet the educational needs of a learner and the learner's mental health may be impacted, making learning even more challenging? So a 13-year-old boy, in his own words, in first grade, I noticed that I was different than everyone else when all the book stuff started happening. Everyone else was in level C, D, E, F, G, and I was still at A. This did not feel good, and I started to think that maybe something was wrong with me, but I still didn't understand why everyone else was higher than me, and I really wanted to read those other books and be at the level past A. In second grade was the year I realized I was really different and felt even more. So I remember when we would have project of reading book and then tell the teacher what happened. I remember flipping to the pages, telling the story from the picture and not the words. The words, said the kid, moved around for me and it just did not make sense. In the classroom, the kid continues, in the classroom, it felt like I was trapped. Like no matter what I tried, I couldn't get it right. It felt terrible. It felt like my stomach was being eaten from the inside out, like I was dropped from a 10-story building and survived and had to just keep on going. I would miss recess a lot because of my work wasn't done. Other teachers always seemed to get frustrated with me and would tell me, pay attention, try again, try harder, you can do it. I didn't understand any of the books anymore. In reading, science, social studies, I felt like I was dumb. I had to open a book and stare at words, and none of it made any sense. I started to hate going to school. I remember my mother practically dragging me to the bus. By the end of the elementary school, it reached a point where I wouldn't even get in the bus anymore. My mother had to drive me to school. Getting out of the car was a whole other story. Going to school felt like I was suffocating, an arrow to my lungs, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't understand why the other kids would open books and read, and I had no idea what those letters meant. I didn't think I could learn. I felt stupid and hated even the idea of school. I was embarrassed. Going to sleep was hard too, because all I could think about was the next day, what's going to be and what's going to be like and how will I survive. I didn't believe I could learn. I thought that something was wrong with me. It was all my fault that I couldn't read or learn. I felt dumb and like I didn't belong. It was getting harder and harder to get out of bed, and a lot of fun stuff wasn't fun anymore. So for this student, for this child, assistive technology came in the middle school, and the student continued. I'm also still learning to use my technology to learn, to e-read. That's what he called text-to-speech, ear-read. Text-to-speech for subjects like science and history. It's different from e-reading a book just for fun. I use audiobooks like Audible when I just wanted to listen to a good book and use things like Learning Ally and Bookshare with Voice Dream for schoolwork. I use the built-in accessory feature on my MacBook Pro and iPad, or read and write for Google. It's just amazing how this kid is absorbed and cling to any technology to be able to access the printed page. He continues, it depends on what I'm doing. It's not as easy as it sounds. Like I said, I'm still learning. Even things like when to stop the e-reading to figure out if I need to take a note or highlight something. I'm still getting familiar with these things. I use my phone too for listening to books and to communicate with others, especially voice to text to let me text. Thank goodness I have an amazing technology coach to help me with all of that. And the student continues, I am smart. I can learn. I just need to keep reminding myself. And for all of us, the $1 million question, what if this kid had access to print through technology from early on, from the beginning? So here is a parent and an advocate addressing print disability. So this advocate and parent writes, I'm a parent of a child with significant print disability. I'm employed by Wisconsin Family Ties, a parent-run nonprofit organization working with families that include children, social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health challenges. In the early years of school, questions and concerns regarding our son's lack of reading skill development were dismissed. We were told, practice more with him. Again, we were told to give him time. As the year progressed, the struggle to read increased. We also saw an increase in our son's anxiety and diminishing of his curiosity and excitement for school. During this time, in addition to his classroom reading instruction, our son was pulled into a special ed room for more reading instruction as his classmate learned in the area of science and social studies. Despite the intervention through the elementary year, the reading gap grew bigger. His access to content areas such as science, social studies became less, and the curiosity and joy of learning continued to fade. He left elementary school with reading and writing skill at the first grade level, with major gaps in content areas such as science, social studies. Despite this, continued the parent, formal testing indicated an expressive vocabulary measuring in the superior range and verbal comprehension above average. Well, clearly, as looking at this information shared by the parent, clearly the printed page was an enormous barrier to the student, and certainly was not his intelligence, which appears to be above average and beyond. So just the barrier of the printed page that has done that. Now that advocate, that parent who is also an advocate, talks about behavior issues. In my role with Wisconsin Family Ties, I have supported numerous families and youth across grade levels. What strikes me as a middle and high school level is the number of these students who exhibit behaviors, poor attendance, and frustration with schools. Often upon closer examination, we find learners who struggle with print. For several of them, when we've been able to remove the barrier and provide them with text-to-speech, outcomes improved. Unfortunately for many, they have reached a point where they don't believe in their own abilities because they have struggled for so long, feeling something is wrong with them, feeling embarrassed by what they cannot do. Parents are often exhausted by this point as well, not understanding the challenges or possibility when a child has a print disability. Now, this parent advocate also talks about the interrelation between reading instruction and text-to-speech, and she continues, this isn't an either-or situation, but rather an and situation, learning to read and learning with the use of text-to-speech to access the curriculum. We need to make it okay to normalize text-to-speech for learners who need it. We need to engage families in a discussion from early on. we need to collaborate, ask questions, and explore the possibility that the technology for text-to-speech has to offer. When we let the gap grow, we increase additional challenges and barriers, not only to learning, but to the whole child and often the family. And this, the parent concludes with a statement, providing access to printed page through technology is far easier than restoring mental health. That is a powerful statement. So let me play this one slide, and then afterward we'll take some questions, Bonnie, if there are any questions. So let me start with, what is print disability?
Print disabled, a person who cannot effectively access traditional print materials because of a visual impairment, physical disability, or a severe learning disability that affects reading. In the United States, it is estimated that 2% of the student population has a print disability, and according to UNICEF, 1 in 4 children grow up without learning how to read. By 3rd and 4th grade, as independent reading becomes important for academic success, students who are behind in reading often begin falling behind in all their subjects. So what happens to students with print disabilities? These learners can face some tough challenges when they try to read traditional print books. As a result, these students may fall behind in school, get disinterested in learning, and even drop out. But here's the good news. Bookshare makes books accessible for individuals with print disabilities. With the world's largest accessible online library, Bookshare empowers learners by letting them read in ways that work for them. They can listen to words read aloud, listen to words and see them highlighted on screens, in large font sizes, read in digital braille, and more.
And what is the use of the book? Thought Alice.
Bookshare helps readers with print disabilities make the transition from learning to read to reading to learn. Many Bookshare members experience an increased interest and motivation to read and begin to find possibilities beyond the classroom. Bookshare is available not just to students, but to all ages, including qualified adults and senior citizens. Today, Bookshare serves over 300,000 qualified students worldwide, and we hope you will join us to make sure every learner with a qualifying print disability, including adult readers, get access to this resource. Be inspired, get involved, learn more at bookshare.org.
Okay, so so that's print disabled. So the picture on the right is Dr. David Rose. So Dr. David Rose, the chief scientist at CAST, the Center for Applied Special Technology, described in this video how the medium itself, the printed page, can become the barrier. An actual disability for some students. In fact, Dr. Rose asserts that the print disability is not located in the child, but rather resides in the interaction between the child and his learning environment. The term print disability emphasizes the role of the learning environment. The printed page is creating the disability of the child. So let's take a look at that.
What is the difference between a print disability and a learning disability? You're all familiar with learning disabilities and all sorts of things, but there's something very different about the word print disability. So we're sort of big for this, but let me just see if someone would venture what's so important and what's so different about this new term print disabilities that's very different than learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, any of those kinds of things. What's the big change? Anybody? I know it's a big audience. It's way in the back. Great. Can you shout? Great. Perfect. It puts the medium as part of the disability and points to the medium and says, print is part of what's going on here. And I forget the second part of your sentence. And Say it again, your second part. Right, rather than the internal. It says it's not in the kid, it's in the interaction between the kid and something else, print. In this regard, it's much more like allergies, okay? That it's something between you and ragweed or dust or whatever. And, but it's a very different concept to say you have ragweed, because then it, I mean, so say you have allergies, because there's two things you can do. One is you can treat the internal condition sometimes. The other is to get rid of the ragweed or the dust or whatever it is, okay? And this is what this change is about, to say, you know what? Print can be an allergen. There are some kids for whom print is not a good medium at all. And rather than say they have an internal problem, they have a problem in the way they relate to the environment of print, okay? A big change. And I think it's the beginning of a whole lot of changes, which are universal design changes, which are to say, instead of locating disabilities in the kid per se, we start to locate disability in the interaction between kids and their learning environments. Print in the next 3 days will often be the boogeyman for instructional materials that are not well designed. New media can be just as badly designed. There's nothing magical about digital media. They can be just as inaccessible and so on. But there's great potential in digital media that we don't have in print to overcome those disabilities of the medium. But those changes are now rapidly happening in the United States. The realization that we need to make materials that work for everybody instead of materials that work for some kids and then calling the others disabled. Okay, is everybody with me on that? So it's a big C, a small but big C change. It says the medium of instruction may be where the disability is. And in fact, our talks now, we typically go around talking about the disabilities of the various media of instruction. And we'll have reason to do that over the next 3 days. What are the disabilities in my curriculum?
Okay, so before we move on to the next slide, Bonnie, are there any questions?
I have a couple for you, Nissan. First of all, of course, the people in the video are very enlightened. How does a parent, for example, who might be listening to our webinar now, be able to bring some of this forward so that the school where their children go are able to access some of this material?
Excellent question, Bonnie. I would say the next few slides, I will talk about DPI message to IEP teams, as well as for staff, how to record this information, need for print disability, the student qualifying for a print disability, and need for accessible education material in the IEP. And that information will be shared in the next few slides. I will also say, Bonnie, that this guide is going to be published in April, as I mentioned earlier, and made available to every local school district. At this point, I'm also working with DPI in terms of how we could disseminate this guide to every CISA, and each CISA then can work with the local school district to share this information. It will be available to parent advocacy groups, so parents can obtain it from either the school or the parent advocacy group and follow the guidelines in that publication.
I had one other question from another person who was involved with decoding dyslexia, as well as IDA, and was wondering if any of those people representing those groups were included in the group of people that were researching your project.
Correct, there were a number of individuals with strong background in dyslexia that participated on our team.
Okay, and one last question, cost-wise, how do parents be able to access the material if cost might be prohibitive, or is it?
Sure, yeah, there are many applications are free. There are some that are that have a certain cost attached to them. But if a student qualifies through the IEP team, the accessibility to Bookshare is free. Materials are free to Bookshare, and even if students then do not qualify under the IEP, the cost is very minimal because Bookshare is supported by the U.S. Department of Education, OSEP. So the idea is to make this available so the cost will not be a barrier to any student who need that, whether they have an IEP or not.
Okay, thank you, Nissan. That's all I have right now.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. And what are the indicators? And we'll try to make it quicker so we can get to the DPI slide a little bit faster. So what are the indicators of print disability? We're going to talk a little bit about, according to Wisconsin AEM Center, according to Bookshare and Learning Ally. So according to Wisconsin AEM Center, a student with a print disability is one who simply cannot access print in a way most students do, and therefore needs an alternative or accessible format like text-to-speech, large fonts, audio, or Braille. So again, the key is student who cannot access in a way that most students do. And how do you know that? Is the student developing a gap? If there is a gap, that means that he cannot access the same way as other students. So as far as the Bookshare, they define print disability as a student who finds it difficult to process or comprehend words. That's, let's say, for our SLD student, OHI, speech or language, EBD. They have difficult to process or comprehend words. Again, looking at the gap. Once there is a gap, that shows that they are not able to process or comprehend. Also, or according to them, also students who have problems seeing the text in books or on screen. These are blind students, or students who are unable to physically manage book or turn on the pages. These are physically handicapped students. Learning, and we'll go quickly, Learning Ally, they use the term reading deficit instead of print disability. And a reading deficit is due to an impairment in decoding, fluency, and or comprehension that does not allow student to keep up with content at the same level as student without an impairment. So a reading deficit is determined by a student's inability to keep up with content due to impairment in at least one of those areas, and they list comprehension, verbal reasoning, decoding, and fluency. So, and that's where the IEP team can, okay, so now I will take a minute and play a 4-minute students talking about the use of text-to-speech as one of the accessible education material available under IDEA for students who without it would not be able to access their grade level curriculum. So let's play this thing.
This program has been so powerful in the lives of these students with disabilities. They're just really cool kids that can't read. That when they're given a passage to read, they spend too much time struggling with the decoding, and that by the time they get to the end of the sentence and you ask them a question, they have no idea what they've just read.
Our focus is to build independence. We want our students to be able to stay in the classroom, in those general ed settings, and get that instruction, take those tests. And this was just another tool that allowed them to be able to stay in those classrooms.
Before I got this, I thought school was fun sometimes, but and I didn't have as much confidence in where I was going and now. But now that I got this, it kind of helps me get more confidence in language arts and other classes where I type and spell a lot.
I hate reading with a passion, and the only thing I like about reading is when I'm able to use it on the computer. And I like things to be read to me so I understand the concept better than the material.
now I don't have to have the teachers supporting me so much, and they don't have to always be there to help me read it.
Students become better readers because they can see and hear the words and better understand what they're reading. It gives them the opportunity to actually do some higher level thinking. And they've become better readers and writers, not only when they're using the software, but when they're even away from the computer.
I can tell a difference. My mom can too when I read and everything else, that my reading has changed way, because I used to have like a second grade or third grade level reading level, and I didn't like reading. But yeah, it's changed a lot, and hopefully it's for the best.
They are very excited about the program that they're using. They see their grades coming up. They are very independent learners now. They are not relying upon paraprofessionals to read to them or teachers to read to them. They are able to take care of that themselves. The confidence level has just shot up. One of the students actually received the most improved student for Central this year because of the change from her freshman year.
My confidence when I would write and everything else, it's changed a lot. That it made me more happier, and when I would see the grades and stuff, it was like, whoa, I didn't think I could do this. And yeah,
I got excited. I'm like, wow, I haven't wrote a paper like this in forever. So I was using more words. I wasn't starting the sentences with the or I all the time. I was changing it around, putting bigger words in there for the same meaning of a smaller word that I used all the time. It was very nice. I was extremely pleased with my papers, and I was really proud of them.
I've got an A on every single one of my English papers this year, which is, English is one of like my hardest subjects, but with the software, it makes it much easier.
The impact that I've seen on these students as a result of using text-to-speech software has been one of empowerment. These students see the capabilities that they have with the capabilities of what they're using, and they're taking it upon themselves to get their classroom work in accessible format, going above and beyond and saying, what's coming up next? What can I do to be ahead of the game? Because I know this is working for me and I see a future.
Okay, so now let me switch to this is the DPI page. This is, and it's part of our guide where it talks about DPI message to IP teams about enabling students with IEP to access regular ed curriculum. What it says on the guide is that in providing, and this is the message to IEP teams, in providing a free, appropriate public education, each IEP team must consider whether a student with disability, and I'll introduce either whether it's blind or SLD or OHI, whether a student with disability requires assistive technology, devices, or services to enable the student to be involved in and make progress in the general ed curriculum. So this is part of the DPI message on that page, but this is the one I wanted to stress with you, because here, this is the importance. It is right there. The message to IP teams: do not ignore text-to-speech. It says, whether a student with disability requires assistive technology, devices, and services. So for a blind student, that would mean Braille. For an OHI student or SLD student who reads at the first grade level and he is in sixth grade, that means accessible education material. This could be audio file, could be text-to-speech, could be large fonts, whatever the IP team determines is the most appropriate accessibility tool for that student. So you may want to know, where do we report this in the IEP? What do you record it? So our guide has this information. So there is a DPI bulletin 20.02 that is the legal requirement for accessible education material for eligible students with disability. And I would encourage all of you to have access to it, to DPI website to read it, because it is very informative, very well written. So in order, and this publication is aligned with a 20.02. So in order for the IEP team to document in the IEP that a student has a print disability, it's a two-step process. Number one is, and you see that graph on the left, number one, the IEP team consider the question, can the student learn and gain information from the same print-based and other instruction material selected for use by all students? If the answer is no, if we see there is a gap, now that's my word, if we see there is a gap, so obviously the student is not able to gain information from the same print, then the IEP team can document that the student has difficulties with reading age or grade level text in that effects of disability section of the I-4 IEP. That's number one. Number two, then you go to the, after determining the existence of a reading disability, in step one, IEP team now moves to determine what kind of accessible tools are needed, like text-to-speech, audio file, braille, and that would be in that I-4 in the special factor section, item number 5. The question is, does the student need assistive technology services? And the answer, and this is where you would put text-to-speech in that I-4. Again, it's a special factor. It's the IEP I-4 called the linking form, special factor section, item number 5. Now, at this point, let me just say another very important element. For text-to-speech technology to benefit the student, it cannot be done, it cannot be used once a month or once a week. It has to be used daily. And this should be included in the IEP, the daily use of that. I do want to cover one more slide important, and I'm not going to go over. I just wanted to share with you, there are about 30 articles that we quote we include in our guide that research studies that are calling for the use of text-to-speech with students with reading disability. But this is the slide I wanted to finish today, because I think it's really important. When to introduce text-to-speech? So when we think this all-important question, there are 4 items that we have to keep in mind. One is the school district obligation under IDEA to provide students with disability access to grade level curriculum. We talked about it. The other item is, what are the important reading development areas and when are they acquired? And then, given all that, how do we balance reading instruction with text-to-speech? So the reading development area, including phonemic awareness, that the discriminating individual sounds in words, phonics, that linking letters with sound, fluency, reading words automatically with understanding, comprehension, making sense of text, vocabulary, knowing what words mean, and writing, composing, and spelling. So when are students acquiring these learning skills? So based on the research that we have looked at, there are several stages. Awareness exploration of reading stage are pre-kindergarten. Emerging reading stages are pre-kindergarten to early kindergarten. Early reading stage is kindergarten to 1st grade. Transitional reading stage, grade 1 and 2. And fluent reading is grade 3 and above. So basically, in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, the curriculum in school focuses almost exclusively of learning to read. However, in grade 4, expectations are that students would have mastered the mechanics of reading and now ready to focus on reading to learn. But what about students with SLD, OHI, speech and language, EBD, who are not able to read like their peers in the 4th grade? So Dr. Dave Edburn, senior research scientist and professor at UWM, who is on our team, notes that the fundamental challenge for student teachers and parents that must confront is how to help a student gain access to the curriculum when they do not have the independent reading skills. And there are several metrics that IEP teams should use in making decision when to introduce text-to-speech. So, for example, so Dr. Edinburgh described terms equivalent to reading instruction, let's say the letter R, and text-to-speech, the letter TTS. Together, these two terms provide a method for determining the percent of time that should be devoted to reading instruction, the R, and the percent of time reading instruction for text-to-speech. So, for example, for a student with disability in second grade who is beginning to show a gap, IEP team may wish to set the R-TTS equation to 70% R and 30% TTS to continue provide high-quality reading instruction, but also providing text-to-speech to enable the student to gain access to stories, vocabulary, and the instructional content that would otherwise be inaccessible because of below grade level reading skill. Now, for a student in third grade with a gap, IEP may wish to explore an R-TTS equation of 50-50. In grade 4 and beyond, the R-TTS equation may need to be reset, such as more effort is devoted to TTS technology, since minimal reading instruction is provided in the general education anyway. Therefore, it is not unreasonable to consider an R-TTS equation of 20% R reading instruction and 80% TTS for students in middle school and beyond, because that will provide them with an immediate access to grade level curriculum. Bonnie, as I know we're close to our time, are there any questions?
Actually, we're a bit over right now, but I do have just one quick question, and then maybe you can sum up with any closing statements that you have. So if parents are interested in investigating the text-to-speech options more for them so that they're more educated when they enter into an IEP meeting and know what they should include in a child's IEP, as you had addressed, where might they go for additional information?
Thank you, Bonnie. So I would say probably this guide was developed precisely for that point, to provide that information to schools, to parents, as well as to students, because this guide starts with the information about the IEP, where to include it in the IEP, what are the research base that suggests the use of text-to-speech for struggling readers, and also includes 40 pages of specific tools that can be used. Many of them are free, that can be used. School districts have assistive technology specialists that will be able to assist teachers as well as parents in how to navigate the software. It's available on any device, whether it's a computer, an iPad, or a phone. And with which is technology that was not available 5 years ago, but now it's almost like a new text-to-speech application is available on a weekly basis. So it becomes more and more accessible to all of us.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. And any closing comments that you'd like to make to the group?
I thank you for the opportunity to Wisconsin Facet to share this information, and I look forward to working with many organizations and schools in the future as this become available and accessible, and we'll be able to provide more answers at that time.
Well, thank you very much, Nissan. I greatly appreciate it. I know that I learned a lot, and I'm sure that those who participated did the same. This concludes our webinar for today. We'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Please be reminded that Wisconsin Facets has over 100 scheduled trainings and webinars for the year 2021. Please check out our website calendar and register for any of those upcoming trainings that you may be interested in. And also please watch for the short evaluation that will be coming your way after the live presentation today. Again, thank you, Nissan, and thank you everybody for your participation. Have a great day.